Rudy Deutsch. My unit was the 5th Field Ambulance. We were attached to the 1st Div, 2nd Brigade, which consisted of the PPCLI, Princess Patricia Light, Canadian Light Infantry, and the Lloyd Edmonton Regiment, and the Seaforth Highlanders out of Vancouver.
Tell me, Rudy, how old were you when you decided to enlist?
We should run through this. I was going to Notre Dame College at the time in 1942. In the fall of 42, I was drafted. I got my draft call. So I didn't want to go into the Army to start with. I tried to get into the Air Force. I joined the Royal Canadian Air Force, and they wouldn't take me because I wasn't in a physical condition. I suffered from a ruptured appendix operation that I had, so they wouldn't accept me. So I went into Regina, which was the Army unit there, and we went through the medical procedures and whatnot, and they drafted me in as A1. So I enlisted. I went active, and they gave me a leave of absence for a while because it was in the fall, and we hadn't finished harvesting yet, so they gave me extension till January the 3rd. I reported back in Regina January the 3rd. We were only in Regina for about a week, and we were shipped on to Camrose, Alberta, where we took our basic training. It was a really hard training for me because I was suffering from this ruptured appendix operation that I had, and we were handling machine guns and whatnot, and Bren guns and rifles, but I was kind of an expert with the rifle and with the machine gun. Being a farm kid, I knew how to manipulate with machinery and overhaul it and whatnot, so it didn't take me long to be an expert with the Bren gun. So they kind of took me in hand for special training for the scouts and snipers, because I was a good shot. I could shoot a V on a target any time I wanted to. But I was difficulty handling this heavy equipment, especially the Bren gun. So when we finished our training in Camrose in March '43, we were drafted out to Ontario, to Camp Borden, Ontario, but we had a choice whatever we wanted to go into, whether we wanted to go into the Service Corps, or the Ordnance, or the Infantry, or the Canadian Army Medical. So I chose to go in to the Royal Canadian Army Medical Corps. So that's when we trained in Camp Borden till around the 1st of July. We finished our course, and then they sent us out to go to England from Hamilton, and we arrived in England in about middle of July, I believe it was, somewhere in there.
Middle of July '43.
'43.
So this was after the Sicily invasion?
No.
Just prior?
Prior to, even prior to Ortona.
Mm-hmm. And we had a rough time on sea and whatnot. I got really sick on the boat. So this is going over to England?
Going over to England.
Mm-hmm.
But we arrived, I think, somewhere up in Scotland, and they shipped us immediately down to Aldershot, down in England. Trained there for, I think, 2 or 3 weeks, and shipped us right on off to Italy. as there were severe battles going on in Italy already, in Sicily and Italy, and a lot of the boys were lost, so they needed reinforcements, so we come in as reinforcements. But I don't know why, the reason they we embarked in a little place called Philippeville in North Africa, where we extended some of our training. My job, we were inland from the Mediterranean about 3 miles, and right out in the desert, and my job was to go down to the port in Philippeville to pick up the mail for our unit, and this is what I done, and I ended up with malaria, and they just about lost me there because I didn't make it back to camp one night, and my buddy Paddy Donahoe come and looking for me one night, and he found me laying out there in the desert, and he got me in, and I ended up for 3 weeks in the 67th British General Hospital, and till they cleared up my malaria with quinine and whatnot. And I caught up with some of the rest of the boys in just before Camp Basso, Foggio and Lucero, and then that's where I was assigned to the 5th Field Ambulance, which was 2nd Brigade, which we were 2nd Brigade, and our first battles was crossing the Moro River, which was a tough assignment there. And
that was the first big struggle.
The first big struggle, because a lot of my buddies that I knew, people from my hometown and whatnot, were killed at the Moro, and a lot of them were taken prisoners. Just outside of between the Moro River and Casa Berardi, where Turquette won the VC, we were one noon we were lined up against, we all lined up with the mess tents waiting for our noon lunch, and I was gawking around, and I seen these 3 planes come out of the sun, and they were winging back and forth, and I lost them by the building, so I stepped out right in the middle of the street to see if I can watch them, and they came right down the street and opened up on us. And I didn't know they were Jerry's Messerschmitts. I thought it was their own planes. And here they opened up, and there was blood and guts all over the place. They missed me. I don't know how they missed me, but these other guys that were trying to run away and try to hide or get under cover, there's dozens of them are shot up real bad. This one guy, his leg was shot up real bad, and I was trying to put a field dressing on it. And the MO came along. He said, "No, Rudy," he says, get out your jackknife." So I got up my jackknife, and I thought he meant I should cut off his pants so I can get a field dressing on. And he said, no, his pants, cut his leg off. So I cut his leg off, and we kind of got a field dressing on there real tight to stop his blood and whatnot. And I remember I never ate. I didn't line up for mess for 3 days after that.
That was your baptism by fire.
That was my, yes, and I was.
Was that your first action as a medic? My first action.
And the next severe action where there was a deep gully right beside, just before he came to Casa Berardo. 4 of us were carrying out a wounded from this deep gully, and I was.
This is the gully, like the battle for the gully.
Yeah, no, yeah, the battle of the gully,
yeah.
And we were bringing out this wounded guy out of the gully, and I get up to the top, and I said, let's rest. So we put the stretcher down right on top of mine, blew the poor guy all to pieces. another severe. And from there on, we worked away with the regiment up into Ortona.
With the brigade, and so you were there with the Sea Force and the
I was,
Eddies.
in Ortona, I was there with the 2nd Brigade. They were very, Edmonton Regiment took an active part in Ortona, where they were street fighting and whatnot from house to house.
And so were you actually stationed right inside the town, or
We
were you outside the...
No, we were right in town. We were stationed, eventually we were stationed right in town where the museum is today.
Of course, you mentioned.
It was an orphanage run by the nuns, and we took over because they had a lot of space there for us to keep our wounded. And this is where we worked from the front lines, from the regimental aid post into Ortona. And most of the time I was out at regimental aid posts, because the infantry they kept losing their stretcher bearers all the time.
I would imagine you're very vulnerable as a stretcher bearer.
So, yes, and I was the guy that volunteered. Anything come up, I used to volunteer to do things. And we were hit in Ortona. The building was hit, and I was blown through the wall.
What is now the museum was hit?
The museum was hit. They had a little church right on the edge of the museum, and into the top was blown off of it. We were hit there, and we were hit at they had a theater, and the theater with a shell hit right straight in the theater one day, and so my back was hurt and my neck was hurt, and but I kept on going, and one day I just come in from the regimental aid posts, which was in between Pescara and Ortona. There was a couple little rivers, and we were stationed, or we were on the one side. The Jerry's were on the other side of Pescara, and we could watch them every morning as they come out of their trenches and whatnot, and they would watch. We could see them, and they could see us, and so one day I come back from regimental aid post, and I was going to pack my bag, and two officers come up to me and said, "Rudy, don't unpack your bag because we've got another assignment for you." And I said, "Where to?" And he said, "Back up the front lines with the scouts and snipers." And they said to me, "You think you can handle it?" And I said, "I guess so." I said, "I just come from out that way." And I remember the scouts and snipers used to come to our regimental aid post for coffee in the morning. I know where their positions are and whatnot, so they hauled me back out as far as they could go with the jeep, and said, "Now you're on your own. You go and find them and take care of the scouts and snipers."
Tell me, was that after the Battle of Ortona that you were up there, or during?
That was in January already.
Oh, that was in January.
See,
I wanted to just ask you before we leave Ortona, there was two questions I had for you. Did you ever find, because you were fighting in such close quarters with the Germans, that you sometimes had did you have Germans on your stretchers as well? Were you ever clearing German wounded?
Many times. We took care of the German wounded as well as we did our own.
And was it vice versa? Did they also take care of our wounded?
They also took care of our wounded. There were different occasions I remember, especially in the Hitler line, where they took quite a few of our prisoners, and they had our wounded prisoners. They took care of them in Rome, in a general hospital in Rome. I remember that, revealing that to us. Can I go on to a little further, or do you want me to?
Well, I'm going to ask you one more question about Ortona, and then we can jump over to the Hitler line if you like.
Okay.
I wonder, did you have an opportunity to participate in the Christmas dinner?
I didn't. Yes, we did. When the Christmas dinner, we run the Jerry's out and we took over and we ate their dinner. And
not in the church, not in the Seaforth church.
No,
then.
not in the Seaforth, but there's another occasion. But they did. They had I have the pictures and whatnot when when they invited the Germans back after the war, here about 3 or 4 years ago, to have the veterans, the German veterans and the Canadian veterans, and I remember I wanted to go so bad, and there was a guy in Calgary even offered to pay my way, but they only chose so many guys. I think they took 30, and they were mostly officers. There was Captain Griffiths from
Yes, Ted Griffiths, I know,
yeah,
from
they
Three
were
Rivers.
from the Three River Regiment, yes. And they went back, and I couldn't. I
You
didn't
missed
go back,
out
but
because
I
you wanted
wanted
to
go
tell them
back.
how you ate their dinner.
I wanted to go back so badly. And okay, do you want
So
to?
yeah, I'm interested to know what happened after Ortona.
Well, maybe I'll just tell the one story about these two little boys.
Oh, please do.
The shells were, you know, the Germans were firing even months after the Battle of Ortona was over, because they were still over in Pescara, and they were firing right into Ortona all the time. And the shells, a lot of time, and landing in the Adriatic Sea. Right, you know, there was, and it was about, Ortona was fairly high on the mountain, about 4 switchbacks back to get up there. And every day there were shells, you know, either hitting directly in Ortona or going over. And this woman was killed one day, this Italian woman, and the next day the man was hit with a shell, and his both legs were blown off, and so they come up and ask for help. They come up to the regimental aid post where we're at, and so I went down. There was a stairs going down the Adriatic, and I went down and picked this guy up, and he was there with 2 little boys, and I carried him up all the way up to our medical station there, which is the museum today. And I had given him a shot of morphine because I know he was suffering really bad, and I kind of bandaged him up to stop his bleeding. When I got up on top there, the doctor said, well, we have to operate again on him right away, and he said, put him out, give him another shot of morphine. And I said, Doc, I already gave him a shot. And well, he said, give him another one. And the poor man, he was begging for me not to give him this shot of morphine. Well, it was my orders to give him to him, and he just, that killed him. And his 2 little boys were there. They were, I think they were about 6 or 7 years old, and they had nowhere to go. Their home was destroyed, and had no parents or anything. So I kept them for a few days, but then I had to go on to the RFP down in the front line, so I had to leave them. And I wish I would have had their names, that I could, you know, I often wondered what happened to them.
Isn't that something?
Yeah. Then, well, I'll finish the story about Rosanna and Roberta. There was the orphanage had a little church right on the corner, and they had mass every morning. These 2 little kids would come over for mass in the morning, and sometimes the shelling would start, and I'd keep them. I wouldn't let them go back, or I'd walk them back to their home. And I had to leave back to Ortona a few months later, and I stayed at their place, and I got to know the family real well. And so when we were back at the 60th anniversary, we tried to find them, and I remember telling Joan, take me up, like I was with my walker, and she was pushing me around, and I said, I want to go up this street. I want to see if anybody knows about Rosanna and Roberta. So I said, that apartment up there, and sure enough, it was right on. We went there, and the guy said, yes, yes. He said, I remember their name, but there's nobody here anymore, and they're either were on leave or something. Or what
They said stay, I'll go for
They
it.
said stay, and they found somebody, and they said, yeah, but their mom and their dad had passed away, and the Maria, one of the older sisters, and Roberta had passed away. They all passed. There was only the one girl left. Rosanna was left. But so anyway, we didn't find them. But then we get. You tell the story, Joan. What happened after
And I
that?
got an email from the tour guide, well, the historian on the tour from BC, and he said, well, Rudy was down south, down Colorado
You have to talk a little louder.
with his sons, and so I came over to answer. We didn't get it. He got the email, so I was answering. There was a message on from Ken, and he said, Rudy, we have an email from Angela. I think that was her
Rosanna.
name. No,
Oh,
from
Angela from the
Angela
museum.
Arnona.
Yeah, Angela, and saying that someone was looking for the Denali's, I think was the last name, and it was either Rudy or Rudolph. So I phoned him back and I said it was Rudy. We didn't know the last name, I didn't. And so anyway, then he phoned again. I guess he sent an email to my daughter, and got the phone number and everything, and she had phoned. Yeah, she had phoned. Rosanna had phoned, his phone here. She said, "Hi Rudy, this is Rosanna from Ortona, now in New York for 40 years. So I phoned him back, and he was still in the States because he'd gone for 3 months. Phoned him back, and I said, phone her, she's in New York. He'd always like it home. I said, you phone her, you're there. You know, and he phoned, and she sent, they've corresponded and talked to one another ever since. Beautiful, he said she was the most gorgeous little girl and just a beautiful woman. And yeah.
These are little girls that you got to know at the orphanage,
Yeah, they were twins,
Yeah, they were
6-year-old twins.
but separate from the little boys
Yeah,
that you
separate.
rescued.
Yeah.
Oh,
Different
isn't
story.
that something? So you really had a good chance to interact with the local kids.
That's right.
She's-
And they remembered you?
She said,
Yeah.
well, you know the rest of it. Anyway, at that time, Maria was 13, and Roberta and Rosanna were 6. She said, Maria, she said to Rudy on the phone, Maria would have remembered the war. She says, I remember the little soldier. And
Oh, isn't that
he
something?
just, his
Yeah,
eyes just
and-
rolled up.
And we keep in touch. She phones. She wants me to come to New York.
Yeah, he was going to
I
go
hope
last
someday I
Easter,
can-
but she
I can
wasn't
go and see
going to
her.
be there. She was going to be away.
What a
So,
story.
yeah.
But we left Ortona, I believe it was in March. The Indian regiment took over from us, but we had to stay and kind of train them before we left. And I can remember we ate their rations and whatnot, and they used to have their tea used to be half milk and half sugar. They used to have, and they used to just have this, well, I don't know what they call it, just a kind of a dough they used to bake on the fire, and we ate that with them.
Yeah, no problem.
They were, and another thing I can remember, you had to make sure you had your shoes laced the right way. You couldn't lace them crisscross. You had to go. They'd come along at night and they'd feel your boots and whatnot. And if you didn't have your shoes laced the right way, your throat was cut. This is right.
That's how they determined who
That
was the
determined
enemy or
whether
not.
you were Jerry's or whether you were Canadian or whether you were.
Oh, you're
But-
kidding.
They were good night fighters, but they couldn't take the shelling. As soon as the heard noise, the shout of the shells bursting, they used to go berserk. We had problem with that because they just run and hide. They wouldn't do a thing.
Is that right? Do
Yeah.
you remember it was at the 8th Indian Division that you were with there?
It was the Gurkhas there.
It was the
It
Gurkhas.
was the Gurkhas, yeah, from
Mm.
India. Mhm. But they were all like they took over our positions as stretcher bearers and medical. They were all very well educated. They were all had mostly doctorate degrees and whatnot. Yeah, they were.
Did you have an opportunity to work with the Indian regiments in the Leary
Yes,
Valley as well?
We did, yes. We worked with them there for quite a while before we pulled out. And then we went back from Ortona, we went back to Algeria to reorganize for 3 days. And we had to take all our red patch badges off, all the Canada badges, everything else. They always disguised us every time we moved, disguised us as British troops, eh? So there's where I met my buddy, Charlie Lang, from my same hometown. And we were kind of, I was a poker player and a kind of an easygoing guy, and so I showed him how to, got him to play poker and whatnot for 3 days, and he kind of got to reminisce about things and whatnot, and then we parted. Like, well, he was with the infantry, and I was with the medical. And he said, Rudy, I shook hands, said goodbye, I won't see you again. 3 days later, I picked him up in the Hitler line with a bullet hole in his head.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yeah. So when we were over for the 60th anniversary, we found his grave and we put him, what did we put on there?
Poppy.
Oh,
Poppy
we
and a
put
flag,
a poppy
Canadian
and a
flag.
flag.
Took
I
the
have the
picture.
pictures we took.
Isn't that something?
And he sent it to, and his sister found the family and made copies and gave it to him.
You know, I wonder, they had you take off your red patch. Do you think after Ortona the Canadians had a bit of a reputation with the Germans and they didn't?
Yes, they always send the Canadians into where the Germans tough with the Panzers or the SS or whoever they were, against the German top troops.
So the Germans were out there trying to find where the Canadians were in the line.
Right, exactly, because they were disguised so they didn't know that we were coming over.
Was that not called Operation Snowflake, though?
tried.
They took the badges off everybody when they moved them.
Do you know anything about Operation Snowflake?
Yes,
Was that what it was called when they took you took the badges off?
I believe so. They in disguise, and when we traveled at night with no lights on the vehicles, maybe just a little dimmers or something, and I had a habit of riding on top of the cab of the 3-ton lorry because I would get sick riding in the back and covered up, the fumes, and I'd get sick, so I'd ride up on top. And why I didn't fall off, I don't know. I used to sleep up on top of the cab and, driving at night through those windy, where we crossed the mountains there, I don't know what they call it, Peonies Mountains or whatever it was, I forget now. The ridge of mountains between the east coast and the west coast of the Mediterranean.
So do you remember that journey then going into the Larry Valley? That would have been a couple of months later.
I remember that very, very well. I'm telling you, I believe there was about 6,000 guns firing day and night. At night, the sky was just lit up just like daylight. And the earth actually shook. In the Hitler line, we dug in, we had to dig in, that's the first thing we done. The ground was hard. I dug us the trench about 2 feet, 2.5 feet, and we got into there. And a guy by the name of Brock was with me, and he shook so bad, he jumped out of the trench and he took off, and I never seen him again. Paddy Donoghue had dug a fairly large slip trench. I got in his slip trench, which probably saved my life. But anyway, the battle was so severe that we had so many wounded and whatnot we were trying to take care of, and it was so hot. And we tried to put up a tent for shade, for cover, and the shells would hit and the tent would blow down, and try to put it up again. And there was dead laying all around. They actually, when we broke through the line, it was mostly barbed wire. They had to cut to get through. There was bodies and parts of bodies hung up on the wire and whatnot. I'm telling you, it was a crime to send whoever done it. Was it Simmons or the general was? I don't know. It should have never happened. But anyway,
Were you sent in the thick of the battle, or were you sent in after the worst
during
of
the
it?
battle, while the battle was going on, while the fighting was going, while they were breaking through, and we had to look after their wounded because we had. Well,
I've heard
and
it
there
was
was-
just chaos.
it was chaos. After 3 days, we were picking up our wounded and our dead and loading the dead on a flat bed on a truck. And we had one of our corporals picked up his son that was killed, and he didn't even know he was in the army. And he just went berserk almost.
Sorry.
The body started to smell after 3 days, so they They come in with a bulldozer and dug a big hole and shoved all the Jerry's and the Canadians and everything into one bloody hole and buried.
So how do you think they figured out how to separate them all after
They
the
didn't.
war?
They didn't. That's why they have on record so many
Missing.
so many missing, unknown.
Is that right?
Yeah. From there, after the battle, from there on, we went on. The next there was Pontecova, and that's where a bunch of our tanks were knocked out. The Jerrys had their 88s dug into the ground, camouflaged, and so that our planes they couldn't find them where they were firing from. That's why in one spot they knocked out, I think, 15 or 17 tanks in a row. They were knocked out, and we had the job of getting these bodies out of the tanks. A lot of times we'd grab a hold of an arm, the arm would come off because they were cooked, or the head would come off.
Oh. How did you recover from that?
Well, this is why today now I'm getting nightmares of these things.
Is it coming back to you worse than
coming
it
back.
used to?
Before, like most of the boys that come back were either alcoholics or, but I couldn't drink because I had a bad stomach, which I ruined in Italy, drinking
You know?
drinking this old wine and stuff we used to. I should show you a picture where one of in the cartoon where they tested out the cat before when they come to a bottle of wine, before they drank it themselves.
Tell her what you found in a barrel of wine.
Yeah.
What did you find at the bottom of the barrel?
Oh, yes. There's a huge bar that we drank out all winter long, and they even the little tanking they hauled them out to the troops for the wine from this big barrel, and it finally went dry in the spring. So I couldn't believe it went dry. So I put a ladder up on the barrel, and I crawled up and I opened the lid up and Flash looked in. There was a dead woman in the bottom of the barrel.
You've been drinking it all winter.
We've been drinking it all winter. No.
But for his nightmares, it's
The
only...
alcohol killed everything, I
Yeah.
guess.
No wonder you have a bad stomach.
I know, he's right.
But it's only the last 3 years he stopped having nightmares, and now they've started, but for
Yeah.
60 years.
I am a workaholic. I used to work day and night. I had a huge farm and seed grower, but now that I'm retired, that I'm relaxed and have nothing to do, I get these darn nightmares.
Tell about last year what
There's-
happened.
Well, last year it happened, just like, it just felt like I was, when our the regimental aid post was, the Eddie's regimental aid post was hit, the shell just cut the top of the house right off, and I was sleeping on the cot, and it just dumped me right out of the cot, and this happened in my bed. All of a sudden, the bed lifted right up and dumped me out on the floor.
Nightmare.
I woke up on the floor, and I had a scar, like I got hurt there in Ortona, and the same scar came back.
Red mark came back.
A
in
red
the same
mark came
place.
back.
Is that right?
And there was nothing that I could fall against or anything. I just dumped me out on the floor. Yeah. It's just like if I was hit by that shell again, and the bed. I could just feel the bed coming up and going in here. I woke up on the floor.
Is that right?
Well, the bed didn't tip, but in his mind. Nightmare.
And I don't know how I fell.
Isn't that
But
something?
that's the nightmares that I've been getting.
Did you must have worked pretty closely with the Padres, did you?
Yes, there was, I knew them pretty well all. There was Bailey. Bailey was the Edmonton Padre. He's the one that, I told him about Charlie Lang and whatnot. And I think he kind of said a prayer over him and whatnot, yeah.
He's the one that wrote a letter to Emil Plinsky's family,
Oh, yeah.
that I have that one.
I see. And did you know Padre Durnford?
Yeah. And I forget what the Seaforth Highlander Padre was.
I think that was Durnford.
Durnford, that's right, yeah.
Mhm. And I don't know the PPCLI Padre, but I heard Durnford didn't do so well after the war. He had a tough time getting over the memories.
Yes,
Yeah.
but it was one of the Hitler line which is, they don't mention it too much in the books. The Leary Valley, whoever wrote it, mentioned it a little bit, and what do you call them? Where Birds Don't Fly, what is the name of that book?
That's Farley Mowat.
Yeah, right. He mentioned not too much about the Hitler line in his book, but I don't know why they haven't, brought that out more of what really happened, because they know they made a big mistake there. The officers were not communicating, or they were fighting amongst themselves and whatnot.
Too many hidden agendas.
Too many hidden agendas, yes, that's right.
And so, do you remember what happened after you got through the Melfa River with the Strathconas and the Westminsters? Now that was 5th Armoured. You weren't attached to them, but I guess you went on ahead with the 2nd Brigade, did you?
Yes.
And you were in and around the Frosinone area?
Frosinone. I was with the Edmonton Frosinone. The Seaforths and the Pats went around the town. Edmonton's went right into the town. There's a big square right up at top in Frosinone, and the boy they marched all night, and they were so tired, so they just flopped against the walls there, and they were taking their boots off. I know I was bandaging, so they had blisters and whatnot, and I was bandaging some of their blisters and whatnot. And they were in there only half, and they had no water. They went all night without any water, and they were thirsty, and they had no food. So I went, first thing I done, I went to see if I could find water or some food for them, and nothing. The whole square, the people couldn't find anybody. Finally, I found one guy. And I said, is there anywhere we can get some water or some food for some of the boys? And he said, come with me, come with me. He took me to a house, and there was the bishop's house, the bishop of the town. And there he had all kinds of food and water. That's the only place we found any. But Frosinone, we were there all afternoon till about 5, 6 o'clock. Then we had to pick up and go on, because our next destination was Ferentino, and we got there at night again to Ferentino. But this is the place where the Pats went around the Seaford. There's on a number 6 highway. I remember this Jerry DR was coming. He didn't know that, most of the Germans had left, and we had won the Battle of Frosinone, and they shot his head, his face, from his nose to half his head was shot off. So I bring him in to Dr. Fairfield was there at the time. No, not Dr. Fairfield, it was Dr. Granger with the Eddie's MO. So he said, just put him out. He said, give him a few shots of morphine. So I did. I bet you I gave him a half a dozen shots of morphine, and he wouldn't die. And he kept putting his hand in his pocket all the time like that. So I said to Dr. Granger, I wonder why he's putting his hand in. He says, frisk him, see. So he had a lot of money that he had in his pocket. That's why he was protecting it. But and we left, and I said, what are we going to do with him? He said, well, just throw a blanket over and leave him.
Do you have any questions about that area, Donna?
Was that you when you?
It was right in Frosinone.
Okay, but the German was shot in Frosinone, not Ferentino, right?
No, he was coming back to Frosinone already. We had taken it.
Okay,
and this German ER didn't know it, so he was
Yeah.
kind of whipping along, and the boys
Yeah.
opened up on him and just,
Yeah, and when Lieutenant Sim was shot
But
in the
I
town square,
where
you arrived after that period.
Yes.
You weren't there to take care of him. You
of
didn't take care of
Pulaski?
no Sim,
No.
Lieutenant Sim.
Pulaski, I can't remember where we was,
I think he was in Ferentino.
In Ferentino, yes,
At the convent.
at the convent,
the
that's
advance
right.
up the hill.
Yeah.
And there was 2 loyal Edmontons. There was Polinsky and
Polinsky, that's right, I still remember that name.
I want to say Miller. But you happen to remember Emil Polinsky,
Yes, I remember
You know.
him, yeah.
you know. Now, do you remember carrying his body up, or was he alive when
No,
you?
I carried his body up, yeah,
Hello?
So he was dead when you?
Hello?
he was dead,
When you
yeah.
picked him up?
Hello, Jim?
Okay.
This is, yeah.
Okay, we'll just carry on here. And I wanted to ask you if you remember entering Rome.
Yes, very well, because the Americans took over after we broke through the Hitler line and Frosinone and those towns, Pontecover and whatnot, and they held us back for some reason. And the Americans, they drove in with their jeeps and whatnot into Rome. When we got there about 2 weeks later, they let us come in, and here they had just taken over everything. They were on the streets throwing hardballs and whatnot. They took over the restaurants and all those things, even the cat houses and everything else, eh? Yeah, they
Did you have a sense for the fact that you'd been kind of denied the glory of entering Rome?
Yes, we sure did deny the glory of going into Rome. Well, then they you know, they took it to, well, actually the first time I was to go in there and take competition in sports against Americans in Mussolini Stadium, whatever they call it, eh? And took us up to the Vatican. You know, we had an interview with the Pope and whatnot. But yeah, we were kind of denied right after the breakthrough of Cassino and the Hitler line and whatnot. And
It was about that time, I think, that the fellows in the Italian campaign were labeled D-Day Dodgers. Were you aware of that at the time?
no, not really.
So that title hadn't sort of sunk in when you were over there.
No. I still recall Lady Astor calling us the D-Day Dodgers.
You must have resented that, or did everybody take it with a grain of salt?
Well, no, they were really offended.
I bet.
Yes, they were. Then they made up a song of a.
I know the
with
song
tune of-
well.
Do you know the song of
Yes.
Lily Marlene? Yes.
Yeah.
This is my D-Dodger hat.
We got that when we were
I
over
should
there.
put it on.
Now, after you left Rome, where did you go?
The next, the Gothic line.
And did you go through Florence, or did you
We
head
went
right
through
over to the?
Florence, yes. We were in Florence and we shouldn't have been there. We didn't know the Jerrys were still there. I know one night we went out and we were crossing. Oh no, we weren't. We heard the Germans sing this song. We heard them coming marching, so we hid underneath the bridge. And I can remember them clip-clapping over the bridge, singing their German songs and whatnot. We rarely escaped that occasion. Yeah.
Did you ever have a truce where you were in communication with the Germans face to face?
Yes, I can tell you this story. In Rimini, the battle was so severe that we had so many wounded and dead laying around that we held a truce for an hour. We picked up our wounded, the Germans stood there and we shook hands, and then they went start fighting again.
For 1 hour.
Isn't that something?
1 hour truce, wasn't it?
1 hour, they held 1 hour's truce.
So going back to the advance to the Gothic line, that I believe was one of those situations where you had a very covert mission to travel in so that the Germans weren't aware of the presence of the Canadians.
Yes, and we just, for 3 days we kept going. Then they were on the run, and we just kept following them. And I remember we've had wounded and whatnot, and so there was tanks going, like infantry and tanks moving at the same time. So we'd load up our stretchers onto the tanks till we got to a house where we could take them off and put them into a house and whatnot. I can remember we had this one house and we just, the floor was just, we had no place to lay down because of the wounded, and we took care of them. And then I remember there was a little summer house right beside there, and I laid down in it. I had a few hours sleep. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning. I woke up, there was 2 Germans in that little shack, and they had their guns stuck up on the side, and here I woke up facing he's
But they didn't take you prisoner.
no, well, no, they because they had surrendered, and
Oh, they were prisoner.
they were.
Oh,
Well, they hadn't gone on with the rest of the German troops, so they just
they
stayed
just
there.
took up house.
They were sitting in this little shack there.
Oh, you
But-
want,
Yeah.
going back to the formal dress.
Oh.
Now, just the approach to the Gothic line, then I think that it got nasty around the end of August, then when the Perths were sent up to Point 111. Were you involved in that action at all, or that was, you were still attached to the 2nd
We
Brigade?
were still a 2nd Brigade. No,
And so then where did
our-
you go through at
our
the...
first action was at the Savia River, where
Okay.
Smoky Smith's won the VC.
Oh, please tell me about that.
Okay. Yes, there's something really drastic happened there.
Be careful what you
Uh,
say.
The 2nd Brigade took part of that again, of crossing the Savia River. The Pats went over, Seafirst went over, and the Pats came back across the river. And they were in this big house, about a mile or so from the river. And the Seaforce, there was a whole platoon of Seaforce were left wounded, were left over there. So the officer came along, he said to volunteer, if anybody would volunteer to come and take care of the wounded across the river. So I volunteered, and a guy by the name of Ishkibab, I have a picture of it here, that we volunteered to go to take a bundle of stretchers and go over, and so it was wide open moonlight night, and none of the infantry, nobody would volunteer. So him, Ishkibai and I, we went, and we get out on the kind of a dirt road. We were going towards the river, and the Jerrys spotted us, because it was moonlight night, and they fired everything at us, and the shells were busting, and you could see the red hot shrapnel flying by, and we jumped from one side of the road to another, kind of a ditch, and we finally got to the river, and we bandaged some boys up and got them across the other side of the river. We got them in fact, we only had half of them across. No, we couldn't. So, and there was a house. There was a bunch of German. They weren't. I guess they were prisoners by then, but they had given up and they had their guns just thrown in a corner. And I said, "Would you help us carry these wounded back?" And they did. I said, "If you do that to help us," I said, "we won't harm you. We'll make sure that you're taken prisoners until they help us." So we got these guys back into this building and bandaged up and whatnot. And probably about 3 or 4 in the morning, we got back to our own regiment there, and I tell you, we had a hard time getting back because the Germans knew that we were there, and we finally, they darn near got us. And I know Ishki and I, we dived into a house, and the shell hit at the same time, and we come out of there just white as snow from the rubble and whatnot. We got back to the regiment, and all we could do was laugh. We'd look at one another and we'd laugh, and fact, I guess we were kind of shell shocked, I guess, and they had to part us for a while because we couldn't work together anymore.
Is that right?
Did you tell about coming with Smokey? When you,
Oh yeah.
that's what she
Anyway,
said. Sorry to know.
that when Smokey, like he got the VC there, I guess he keeps on saying it wasn't I wasn't the brave guy, he says, because when we picked up the wounded there and Smokey was in the ditch and we picked up the one of his men was killed and the other one was wounded. And when I met him in Italy in the 60th anniversary, and I said, Smokey, well, I was the guy that picked. Yeah, he said, I left him for you. He said.
Yeah,
Does he remember you? Do you think he remembered you?
I think he remembered me. Yeah.
Now was
Shook
that
his hand
after?
there,
We shook hands and yeah.
Isn't that something? So you were there right on the scene when
I
he,
was right
when
on
he
the scene.
was
We were
awarded
right on the
his,
scene picking up the
just
wounded.
after, I'm
Just
assuming.
afterwards, yeah.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
And then where did you go after this?
From there we went on. Oh, where was it? Anyway, we ended up at our last assignment was a place called Rushi, a little town, and I just forget the name of the river now that we ended up at.
Senio River?
We went there.
Yeah, I remember the Senio River, but I think there's one beyond
There was the breakthrough of the Gothic line, that was
Yeah.
crossing the Foglia River, and then Point 111 and 204, and I believe the 2nd Brigade went through and around that area, and then was it 2nd Brigade hit Coriano Ridge, I think.
Coriander Ridge, yes, you had to see,
Mhm.
yes.
Picture of that.
And do you remember the battle at Coriano
I
Ridge?
remember the battle there, remember,
Yeah,
yes,
there.
the battle, I remember different stories where Cornell Ridge, that's where there was a museum there or something, I know we got a lot of artifacts out of that place.
At the time,
Yeah, right after, yeah.
in 44.
I don't know who they blamed, they blamed the Seaforth for doing it, but
Oh, this is the mansion, and I don't remember the name
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
mansion. So were you were
That's right.
headquartered in the
the
mansion?
mansion, that's right.
Oh, and so everybody was involved in looting the place? Do you remember what
I
happened
remember
there?
them looting the place, and I think they blamed us, the Seaforth, for looting the place. I don't, but we actually didn't loot it. It was looted before we got there.
Oh, so you believe that the Canadians weren't involved in looting?
No, I don't think so. I really don't think it because I didn't know any of the boys that had got any treasures or anything out of there.
Right. And that's a controversial point, I think, that the looting of that mansion.
Looting of that man, that's
So
right.
it kind of was a
exactly.
stain on the Canadian
Yeah.
reputation.
Mhm.
Because when we were there, they pointed it out, didn't it? It was way
They pointed
over
out
there.
way
Mhm,
way
that
over
big
on the
yellow
other, yeah,
mansion.
yeah.
Yeah.
And was that just at Coriano Ridge? That was just below
Coriano-
San Fortunato?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
go
That was-
ahead.
Now, you had mentioned Coriano Ridge in the past, saying that when you went back, some of your worst memories came
Oh,
from
Their
the
memories
battles
came
there.
I
back.
could
yes.
see it, he
Now,
said.
what was
boom,
it about
So it was just there.
Coriano Ridge
when you get off that
as
bus.
compared to the Hitler line? What
Oh,
kind of memories
no.
that
To see his
came to
face.
you?
Not near as severe a battle as the Hitler line.
Mhm.
No,
Yeah.
but you said when you
Yeah.
drove, when the bus drove up and you got out, you said everything was just like you were there yesterday.
You had a
yeah.
flashback.
I had a
The
flashback,
flashback,
just
yeah,
like
that's
everything
the word,
just came
yeah.
back again.
Is that
Like
right?
Rimini, that was around the area of Rimini. I think that was after Rimini or before. I just can't remember. But that was the last severe battle that we were in. Was at Rimini.
Would you say the worst of it was over after the Hitler line?
Yes, the worst of it was over after Hitler line, and then we were pulled out in February. I think we all were pulled out. Went to Lakehorn. Both the regiments, the 1st and the 5th Regiment, were pulled out, and we assembled in Lakehorn, and we caught LSTs across to Marseille. Then we went on through France, Belgium. We were in Belgium for a couple of weeks, then into Germany, and then out of the forest in Germany, we crossed into Holland. That's where we crossed the Isel River in Holland. And I was on the first buffalo that crossed the Isel on Dawn Company with Sidney Frost.
With the Patricias.
Patricia's, yeah.
Now after that, the war was over quite soon after crossing the Isel River, was it?
Well, it lasted till we went on in through Apeldoorn, all those little towns in Apeldoorn. I can remember when we hit the big forest at Apeldoorn, the Jerry's they were just behind trees. We couldn't, so we used flamethrowers, and I still remember them pulling their guns, their artillery with beautiful horses, and these horses were killed and burnt, as we used the flamethrowers. And this is where we were advancing into the forest, and there's I wish I would know the little town now, I forget it. But I was with Major Fairfield, myself, Corporal Blacklock, and a guy by name Goody, and it was about 3 o'clock at night. We were advancing, and Major Fairfield said, "Rudy, well, we're going to stop. We're going to find a house, and you see if you can find a place where we can bed down for the night." So I go off on the street somewhere there, and I was just going to go and knock. There was a little step up, approach coming up. I was just coming up here, and something told me, "Get out of the road." And I jumped off, and the Germans, they just opened up with their machine guns inside. They would have just. So I run back, and here we knew we were about a mile ahead of the infantry. So he said, "Rudy, run back." I said, "We're too far ahead." And then we got back, and sure, the infantry was way behind, and they come and they.
Were you involved in the liberation of Holland in such a way that you were
Yes,
part
I
of the
really
relief
was involved.
for the people?
We were in Achterveld. This is our last position is in Achterveld, and I took part of the food drop there. And I have pictures where they brought in the German generals with the white flags and blindfolded, and the little school in Achterveld. I took part of that. I was an interpreter there.
And do you remember the children?
I remember the children, and
Sidney Frost, you're the only two.
I got a plaque from the Dutch people from Achterveld. Sidney Frost and I are the only ones that got that plaque. And they maybe get the.
But you did tell them the story behind the plaque about saving the church?
Well, it was just outside of Achterveld. I forget the name of the place, but there was a big windmill there anyway. There was a German. There was wounded quite badly, and I was taking care of him, trying to stop the bleeding. And he says, "You saved my life," he said, "and I'll tell you what's going to happen." I said, "Well, I know there's a war on." I said, "Anything can happen." He said, the big church in Achterveld was dynamite, ready to be blown up." So I got over to where Sidney Frost was, and I told him, and he got the engineers to. He saved in time before they blew it.
Were there people inside the church?
Oh yeah, the whole town would have been blown up.
Oh, they put the whole town in the church.
Oh yeah, if they would have blown, there was enough dynamite to blow the whole town up.
And you and Sidney Frost prevented that from happening.
Preventing that from happening, that's why we got this plaque.
Isn't that something?
It's a gorgeous church.
And now they invited us back twice now, once to honor us. They built a cairn at the church in our honor, and I have pictures where I.
This says the same thing as that in in Holland, and that this is a church.
So you saved the whole town.
We saved the whole town.
There's still a whole.